Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and part of the Tennis Channel podcast network. I'm Gill Gross with Amy Lundy. Joel Drucker will be back next week, and the 2022 Australian Open draw is out, which means we are here to preview it. Of course, extenuating circumstances this year where we are not positive if one of our three is going to be in the draw or not. His name is there, but there is still some uncertainty. So what we are going to do is we are going to start with Rafael Nadal because we are recording this at about midday on Thursday. So if anything happens, the first part will still be current no matter what before Rafael Nadal's first round match. And then we'll get to Djokovic, maybe a quick discussion about where we stand right now in just the visa situation as a whole. And then we'll get to the draw. All right, Amy, Rafa's draw, first reactions.
That it's one of the toughest draws that I've seen for the big three in quite some time. And it's just a reflection of Rafa's lower ranking. Remember, he didn't play that much last year. His ranking slipped, so he doesn't get that first tier status. And because of the way the stars aligned in this one, he ends up with some players who are kind of on a hot streak and then some good stalwarts who are you never want to see in that part of the draw. I mean, Kokkinakis, I've had my eye on him because I don't know if people are familiar with his story, but just a lot of injuries that some of them were, like typical overuse injuries, but then other ones were just bad luck. Like he tripped over a marketing, some sort of advertisement in Monte Carlo and really messed up. I think it was his kneecap or his ankle or something like that. And that set him back. So he's had all these setbacks. And now, Gil, within the last year, it's finally coming together for this Australian. And he's had two good runs in these 250s that have happened in the run up to the Australian Open. He's wild card for the main draw. And if he is able to get through his first round match, he'll meet Nadal. And that's not a hometown guy. I mean, he's from Adelaide, but Australian guy is not really who you want to meet in the second round.
Yeah, I think he's the guy to start with the discussion about Rafa's draw and because you're right. He played a career high in matches in 2021. And that's such a good sign. He was healthy the entire year, and you didn't hear about him because he was mostly at the challenger level because his ranking started from nothing. So he's worked into the top 200 now, and he's really, really talented. He's a dude who was winning tour level matches as a teenager, and everyone would have thought at that time he was going to be a top 50 or a top 30 guy. And you're right. He's been awesome in these last 2 weeks. He made the semifinal in Adelaide, won. He beat Francis Tiafoe. He beat Michael Emer, who is another player who I think will have a good year. And then he lost to Monfils. So now this week he's in Adelaide 2, and he crushed Benoit Paire. He beat John Isner, and now he plays Cilic in the semifinal. So yeah, a lot of promise. That's a good player. And then you move beyond that, and I think you're absolutely right. This is the kind of draw that if Rafa was a top 4 seed, he wouldn't have to contend with, because especially if you look at the quarterfinal. But before that, so what do you think? There's Karatsev in the mix. There's Khachanov in the mix. Khachanov's a potential 3rd round. Karatsev or Hurkacz is a potential 4th round. And then we'll get to the other side of the draw.
Yeah, and just about Kokkinakis, he beat Federer, don't forget. So the guy has some talent. Khachanov. The guy's forehand is a little it's a little jacked, but if it's on, it's in some ways the way he moves, he kind of reminds me of a poor man's Djokovic. Solid player, not somebody you want to see in round 3. That's more of like a round 4 guy that you would want to face him. I mean, Hurkacz and Karatsev, those guys are solid gold. You wouldn't want to meet either one of them. That's more like a quarterfinal or even semifinal deal. And then in the quarters, you've got Zverev or Shapovalov and Gill. I mean, we should disclaim that we
Yeah.
are going in terms of who we think will be there. Of
Right.
course, there's going to be upsets.
Well, who do you have? First of all, do you have Hurkacz or Karatsev?
Hurkacz.
I do too. And then I have Zverev. I think it would be
Yeah.
hard to pick against Zverev. And then there's
Yeah.
also I guess besides Shapovalov in the top half, there's Opelka. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he has he hasn't made a run at a major yet, but he has the
Mm-hmm.
talent to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what sticks out to me?
What?
Great backhands
Yeah.
and big serves. And
Yeah.
if you look at Nadal on a hard court, what is going to bother him? First of all, on the quickest surfaces, his return is not rock solid as a Djokovic or a Murray. There have been matches in his career where he has struggled against big servers at Wimbledon and the U.S. Open, and less so the Australian Open. He's been rock solid at that tournament in terms of how he's looked in the early first week for the most part. But it's the return and it's the cross court forehand. And as a
Yeah.
righty, do you have a good enough backhand where it's going to get broken down? Or do you have a backhand where you're going to be able to step in, take the ball on the rise, take advantage of that consistent hard court bounce, and do a lot of damage, not only protect the backhand, but apply pressure using the backhand? Khachanov, Karatsev, Hurkacz, backhand guys with big serves. So I even think stylistically, forget how good a player these guys are, right? Because you could, if it were Diego Schwartzman, great player, but not a matchup that Nadal generally struggles with, just as an example. But these are matchups that I actually see as difficult for Rafa as well.
And Gil, it's not just the matchups because let's face it, he's Nadal. He can get through some of these matches, but it's the time on court. Rafa, at his age, needs to have a couple of easy matches. So, I mean, if I'm a fan of his, because we know Rafa doesn't really think this way, but if I'm a fan of his, I'm really hoping for some upsets to get some of these guys out of there so that he's not playing a 5-set match early on.
Yeah. Just to deliver some numbers on Nadal's quarter,
Mm-hmm.
five major semifinalists last year out of the eight seeds, or the wait, yeah, out of the eight seeds, five of them were major semifinalists in 2021. Two of them were quarterfinalists, and then the other one is Opelka. So
Mm.
there's nobody like I don't
Mm.
really want to pick on people, but like if you look at a seed and let me just for the fun of it go to Djokovic's quarter. Cam Norrie has never been deep in a major. Christian Garin has never been deep in a major. Sonego has never been deep in a major. Alcaraz is about to, so I won't count him. I'm sure that's coming. But you have a bunch of guys who just going off past results, and we could talk about if they're ready to do it or not. But generally, in with 32 seeds, there are going to be some guys who have not seen the second weekend of a major. And this quarter, almost everyone has, which is kind of
Yeah,
amazing, right?
that's a really great observation. And, in order for Rafa to make a play to win number 21, which I happen to think is possible, especially given the firestorm around Djokovic, I do think it was possible. Now that I've seen the draw, it seems a little less possible. But for Rafa to do this, it just seems daunting. And then when you get into the quarterfinal potential matchups and beyond, I mean, even Medvedev is, it just seems like if he's made it through all this and then he meets Medvedev in the final, it just seems a tough, tough task. But
Yeah.
I do not bet against Nadal. Never. I do not bet against him.
Yep. That's been a good way to bet over the last 20 years. I'll throw this out, just a historical nugget, and then I actually want to respond to your point about court time. 2017, when Nadal came back from that injury-laden 2016 year, he had a terrible draw, and he was Federer, not Nadal. Federer, when he came back from the 2017 where he missed the second half, came back against Berdych, Nishikori. Berdych round 3, Nishikori round 4, Murray quarterfinal, Wawrinka semifinal, Djokovic final. There was a chance, based on his draw, that he could play all top 10 players from the round 3 on. So if we're just going, I don't know, big 3 history, maybe could be worse, but obviously 17 seeds also different from being a 6 seed. Nadal's ranking is still strong, but remember that.
Yes. And by the way, I wrote a piece on Nadal, and the guy has finished second in this tournament a lot, and that's actually the mark of a great player. He's got a good record at the Australian Open. And incidentally, when I said I don't bet against Nadal, I don't bet. By the way, it's just sort of a not literal.
And to be clear, by the way, as someone who understands betting markets because I've worked in the industry, betting on Nadal every match, regardless of how good he is not a good strategy because everybody knows he's good. So you would lose money.
You're not going to win a lot of money. But I peek at the odds too, because I just like to know, like, and Rafa is in 4th, assuming that Novak's going to be in the tournament. He's the 4th favorite to win.
On court time, I will say, regardless of the draw, I was not really going to be, and I think a little bit more so than you, I am not bullish on Nadal at this point. And a lot of that has to do with what I've heard from Carlos Moya. It just sounds like it's been a tough 4 months. And we know for a fact that Nadal is coming from essentially 0%, 2 months without picking up a racket. You're kind of starting from 0 at that point. And then after coming from 0%, so you can say August is a wash. You can say September is a wash. Apparently, there was lingering pain. There were a lot of issues. There were a lot of practice sessions that were 45 minutes, an hour long, no movement. So I'm going to say maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks of really, really light training. Now you're into October. So I just wonder, what has he had? Has he had about a month here on the training court? So I'm worried about the timeline of actually if he's had enough time to build himself up. Then you had the COVID after Abu Dhabi, which took him off the court for a week. There's just been a lot of issues and setbacks. But then even more so, I do feel like there's a confidence thing recently that hasn't been great. And Nadal I feel like he needs to build himself up a little bit more so he feels less insecure, especially on a hard court, because
Gill, he did just win a tournament.
Wait, but
if this were anybody else,
I agree.
But it was only a 250.
I agree, but
it was on Rod Laver Arena, and he had to do it against a serve and volleyer, which was really unconventional. And I'm like, is Rafa going to be okay with this? He's got to dip the ball to this guy's feet like over and over and over. And this isn't necessarily his bread and butter ball. And yet he did it. I mean, he's just amazing.
I agree. But I'm going over a very large sample size here when I say Nadal hasn't been as clutch as he would usually be or he should be in the last year. Going back to the Australian Open, where he was the Tsitsipas loss just in the 3rd set. In the 4th and the 5th set, I don't think he could have done anything. But that was really weird what happened there. Like, that was an awful 3rd set tiebreak. And then you go back to last week where, he won the title, but he was broken serving for the match twice in back-to-back matches because he made some strange mistakes. I think he can get that out of his game. I think he will get that out of his game, but he just needs to play a couple of tournaments. Like, to me, that is someone who draws confidence out of, yes, training, but also winning matches. And there just haven't been a lot, especially with the hard courts under his feet. So all in all, I think Nadal at 80 or 90%. And keep in mind that last 10% is the hardest to get to and build up. I think he can pull off some big wins. I think he can win matches next week and maybe the week after. But I also feel like we could see something like we saw last year, where once you get to the cream of the crop, which is going to come somewhat early, really in the fourth round. I mean, like Hurkacz at his best, for example, I think is almost, borderline an elite player for sure, in terms of the players who are the best in the world. That's where I think we could see the preparation and the confidence level kind of hurt Nadal.
Yeah. And to your point, this is not his surface. As we go through the tournament, let's keep an eye on that return position. And let's keep an eye on what he's doing with his serve, and see how he's tweaking and progressing with that.
Yep, that could change things. It looked really good. Maybe Nadal's serve is going to be the thing against Cressy. His ace rate was through the roof, highest I've seen it in a really long time. So maybe that's going to be something that can be an unexpected boon for him. And then before we move on to Novak, I just want to reiterate Rafa's one title, as you alluded to, with how good he's been at the Australian Open, so misleading, because you're right. He's been so consistent at the Australian Open going deep. So I think we covered all the bases there. Novak Djokovic is still awaiting a decision from Immigration Minister Alex Hawke, which is going on, dragging out way longer than any of us would like. Do you have any theories for why?
Yeah, I've got a theory, and we're recording this just as people are waking up in Melbourne, Australia. So this could all be put asunder when they wake up and if they make a decision. So I've been, you know me, I like strategy. So I've been gaming out the strategy in my mind. And I feel like this really is a game of strategy between Novak Djokovic and the Australian government. And here are the scenarios. There's really three scenarios. Number one, they deport him. They announce that for whatever reason, and they've got three big reasons that they could use, although I think two of them are on shaky ground, but they got, one that they can really use, and they do have these God powers that they can use them, and deport him and try to get him out of there. Scenario two, they let him play. And they say, you know what? He's here. He made it through. It's just, we've got other things to worry about, like Omicron. Let's just let him do his thing. And then three is this letting him twist. And right now he is twisting in the wind in limbo. And by doing that, they don't boot him out of the country and therefore make him a martyr. They don't have to deal with this question of a 3-year ban. And with the sword of, what is it, Gill? The sword of Damocles or something like that everybody's been calling it. He's got this sword hanging over his head. He's probably not going to play his best. Now, I know he's Novak Djokovic, and when he's up against it, he can play. But he is a human being. And I think that it's going to be really tough for him to get through this tournament with the prospect that he could be deported at any time hanging over him. So if he loses, sooner in the tournament than he normally would, then he leaves the country of his own accord. And they don't have to do anything. They don't have to address the ban. They don't have to go back to court. None of that. And basically, it's like a Cobra strategy, because you're going to have the Australian fans on one side, pressure building up there. They're going to rip him. And then you've got the prospect of being deported on the other side. And I think that's actually a strategy they may be considering.
I kind of think we're going to get a decision from Hawk one way or the other, just because I feel like it looks bad if a decision is not made and they've already taken enough damage. And I do think that there could be some deserving criticism if he just leaves it. So we'll see. I do want to, the only thing I'll add about this is one thing that, if we're being honest, besides all of the logic and reason, one thing that I think is concerning from Djokovic's end is all of the polls that I've seen in Australia, and I've seen 2 or 3, about how the public feels. Most of the Australian public, which is extremely unrepresentative of the community of tennis fans, or certainly the community of Djokovic fans, or it's a very specific data set of civilian Australians, right? They are in favor of Djokovic's recancellation. And when you're talking about politicians, of course, they want to do what is popular. Australia is a democracy where politicians run for office. So I do want to throw that out there, that I would be concerned from that perspective if I'm Novak, if I'm a Djokovic fan. And if you want to add anything to that, or we can go ahead.
Well, it's just a lot of people have been asking my opinion of the whole thing, particularly with regard to Novak. And I'll admit, I'm usually the one on this show that kind of takes the contrarian view, because and defends and supports Novak, because I do think there's been some unfairness in the coverage, and for whatever reason. On this one, I've really had to do some soul searching, because I really disagree with his position on the vaccines. And but I'm not for mandates. So there's where he and I agree. I'm not really for mandates in all scenarios. I think a private company or a private entity has the right to mandate, but even the World Health Organization just issued a statement yesterday saying that they don't think that countries should mandate vaccines the way for international travelers, the way that Australia has. So World Health Organization and I are on the same team, and Novak. But in terms of the revelation about testing positive on December 16th, and then finding out and then being around people, even though he was around the kids, but he says that he didn't know that he was positive at that time. Well, did you call the parents? Did you follow up? Did you tell them, look, I was COVID positive and I was around your kids, so watch for symptoms, that kind of thing. Was there any mention of that? And then he was around the journalist by his own admission. And that's really tough for me. So how do I square this? Well, first of all, Novak is a tennis player, but he's not a god. He's a human being. So I've covered many different athletes from many different sports, and they're all human, just like you and me. They make mistakes. And I feel kind of the way I feel about my own child. If my own child did something that was pretty wrong, and as parents, we know that happens sometimes, you still love your child, but you do not condone the behavior. And you say that is wrong. And you don't go out and you don't try to defend the behavior, or you don't try to twist it or turn it on somebody else, or say, well, that kid also did something wrong. No, you take responsibility and you say that behavior is wrong, but I still love you and I still support you. So I would like to see Nole Fam have that, more of that kind of a view, supportive, but not condoning of the behavior.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you just said from start to finish, from some of the coverage being unfair, but also some of the kind of cult-like blind support being just as twisted and fact-based or reachy. So, there's definitely some behavior there where it's like Novak has taken responsibility for mistakes that he made. So that should be, first of all, that should be appreciated. But also that should be a signal that mistakes were made when, and no one's anti-Novak for pointing them out, unless you think Novak's anti-Novak. And that would be something, because he's pointed out his own mistakes. Hopefully we get even more clarity when Novak is able to answer questions and there's no longer ongoing legal issues, and this can be somewhat put in the rearview mirror. I mean, obviously this is going to be something that's talked about, and, just another kind of an inflection point that happens in the career of a player. But well said. And that was good. Let's get to the opponents. Let's get to the draw here. And Novak opens with Miomir Kecmanovic, fellow Serb, Tommy Paul, potentially in the second round. Paul will play a qualifier. What do you think of Novak's quarter?
Well, first of all, isn't it interesting? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but isn't it interesting that he has a fellow Serb, that the fates align that way? Because if you think about the way that the crowd is going to be, assuming that he plays, the Australian crowd is going to be angry. They're going to be rawr. So then there's this fairly large, as a minority group goes, Serbian base in Australia, and there always has been. And they've obviously been very supportive of Novak. But now you got a fellow Serb. So they can cheer Novak, but it's not like they can boo the other guy. So I think that's very interesting. And I think it's going to favor the Australian crowd, and it's going to be very difficult for Novak emotionally. He may not show it, but I know for a fact that he does want support and approval. So I think that first round match, if he plays it, is going to be difficult, but he'll probably get through it.
Then again, Kecmanovic is not someone who I don't think any regular Australian tennis fans have really clenched onto emotionally. So I guess it could be worse, right? It could be like Andy Murray versus Novak Djokovic. And then I mean, obviously any of the Aussies, that goes without saying. If you had James Duckworth against Novak Djokovic, it would be a Davis Cup environment, to say the least. But okay, that's interesting. I don't think Kecmanovic, tennis wise, is a very threatening first round opponent. Now, maybe he can play more like he did 2 years ago. I want to say he had a better year. Last year he was really down and didn't make a lot of noise.
No, I think it's more he's got to go out there and experience the crowd. And get through it, and he'll put on his Novak blinders, and he should be fine. But then he'll go back and he'll reflect on what he just went through, and will that sort of dent him or affect him emotionally going forward?
Yeah, we'll have a general conversation. We'll end with a general conversation about I think Novak's just ability to play his best in general at this event. But I actually want to jump to the other side of the draw. I actually think Novak's eighth is pretty favorable, all in all. I mean, you have, if you look at the seeds, especially, you have Gael Monfils, who's never beaten Novak. You have Lorenzo Sonego, who is a serve and a forehand, a play style that Novak absolutely generally tears apart. You have Christian Garin, who's on a hard court, not a real 16 seed. And then are Carreño Busta and no, that's the other side.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's the other eighth. So
right.
I think
that would be the next eighth.
Yeah.
Right?
The quarter. Yeah. Okay. That would be a potential quarterfinal, either Nori, Carreño Busta, Alcaraz, or Berrettini. But do you kind of agree? I think Novak's eighth is pretty, pretty favorable. And then I think there are some more interesting names in the bottom half of Novak's quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really surprised that Monfils won the way he did last week. Maybe marriage is treating him right and he's finally just settled in his mind, but he looked sensational.
He did.
Still, I don't know, maybe that could be a really good match, with Novak being a little dinged up by the whole firestorm and Monfils hitting his stride, but it's still not, I don't think that this draw is still as difficult as Rafa's.
Right. And I agree. Tommy Paul played amazing at the end of last year. He won Stockholm and looked awesome. And we'll see. I'm happy for Tommy if he gets that opportunity to showcase himself center court at a major, because I can't remember him getting the chance to do that. I know he played team at Roland Garros a couple years back, but I think Paul is a dangerous unseeded player. But again, and you're right, the Monfils match could be good, but it's on the other half, it could be Berrettini again, which would be four
Yeah.
straight.
It always is. It's Carreño Busta or Berrettini. You can pretty much mark it down. They're going to be in his side.
I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of it. I don't want to see Djokovic Berrettini. I'm like, I guess I'm upset for two parties. I'm upset for Berrettini, who should get, I mean, at Wimbledon, it was the final. So there's no bad luck in the draw when it comes to what happened at Wimbledon. But other than that, it's like, I don't like it for Berrettini, but I don't like it for entertainment and interest either, because it has been the same match 3 times in a row. To a T. It has been the same match. However, there are a lot of good players around Berrettini. Carlos Alcaraz, Cam Norrie, Pablo Carreño Busta, and I think I'm missing one. Hold on. Am I missing one?
The ones I had marked down as potentials were Carreño Busta, Alcaraz, and Berrettini. I just want to say this about Alcaraz. There were a couple players that were sort of, for me, ones to watch after last year, and Alcaraz certainly burst through, and I was like watching his every move at the end of last year, and he was playing sensational. But then I didn't really hear from him much on social media. I mean, there was a little bit here and there. And then I woke up one morning recently and was like, where is Alcaraz? Where is he? He's not in. And I was looking through all the draws of all these tournaments, and he wasn't entered in any of them. And he only got to Australia a few days ago, Gill. And I'm not sure why he didn't enter any of these tournaments. So I don't know if he's a little hurt, or if he just needed to take some extra rest, or didn't feel that he needed the warm up down under, which seems strange because he's so young. So I'm a little bit hedgy on him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I wonder why. I kind of, part of me wants to imagine that him and Juan Carlos Ferrero made like a moral stand against the length of the offseason and was like, we need this long to improve and work on our skills.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's an optimistic way to
he did post a very nice photo of himself and Rublev's, after they had obviously had a hitting session, and he looked, game and lively as ever. So I think that he'll probably be fine.
He's my pick.
He's your pick.
He's my pick to make the quarterfinal. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think Berrettini, I think he's an excellent returner. He's already beaten Matteo Berrettini, and I just think it's a good matchup for Alcaraz. I also think Berrettini's first round opponent, Brandon Nakashima, is an excellent returner who has beaten John Isner, who has beaten Milos Raonic. I didn't check against Opelka, but I think he has a really good track record against the big servers. So I do think Matteo could run into some good competition.
It's just so funny how we're always downplaying Berrettini. I mean, it doesn't matter what the tournament is.
Is that true?
Yeah, because I mean,
On grass, everyone was really high on him.
yeah, and he made the finals, so he did. I think people have just sort of pigeonholed him as being a certain style of player, and that there's a ceiling on, what he can accomplish. And I think this past year, last year, he exceeded expectations. And the best thing about Matteo Berrettini is his demeanor. He
Yes.
does not get ruffled. And, like if you or I are playing or anybody else in the world and we hit a bad shot, we get mad. This guy laughs at himself sometimes. He finds it amusing. And, if you think of everything that's on the line and the stakes are so high, he's just a very chilled out guy. And I think that actually, with the serve and the forehand, that combination takes him a lot farther than people expect.
You are so right. He is a player that I would, if I had a young one, I would say that's how to compete, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how to compete. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he has the right balance of fire, of positivity, of not being, overly crazy and emotional, but also using the emotion to his benefit. Yeah, he's amazing mentally, and he's clutch. In terms of Novak and just the extenuating circumstances, assuming he plays, people might call me hypocritical because I'm worried about Nadal and how much time he's had to train and get ready. Djokovic just lost 4 days of training. I can tell you I'm not concerned about that. It's not hypocritical. Here's how I feel about it. Novak comes from 100% and loses 3-4 days of training from 100% ready to go. I don't think you lose it that fast. It's hard to gain it. That's why I'm concerned about how many days Nadal has lost in the last 3-4 months. And I'm not concerned about the week before the tournament, Djokovic losing a couple days, because when you come from 100%, you don't lose it that fast, but it is incredibly slow and difficult to gain fitness and to develop new skills. So that is the distinction I draw. So I'll just start physically, not mentally. I don't think there's any reason for concern. Do you agree?
Physically, I guess not. Gil, let me ask you this. If there were no pandemic, in an ideal world, would Djokovic have come? I mean, I don't know because I haven't looked at it, but maybe you know. Would he have come to Australia and played one of the warm-up tournaments or not?
He would have played ATP Cup, I think. However,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
but he just played Davis Cup. So that would have been what Medvedev did, for example, 3-week off season. Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that catches up to people
I agree.
eventually, maybe not now.
I agree.
And Rublev as well. So eventually I want to do something on Dominic Thiem and show how many matches the guy played there for a stretch of about 3 years, and track some other athletes and say, look, this is a cautionary tale. And I think that maybe Medvedev and Rublev are maybe on the upper crest of that. So it's just something that they might want to watch. But I don't think they're quite there yet. I mean, they're still very young and agile. So those are two that if I were picking, those are two that I would really look for to do well in this tournament.
Okay. I think Rublev has played more than Medvedev. Rublev's absolutely played a ton. No doubt about that. Okay. Mentally for Novak, that's where I think you have questions. I remember, and we've probably discussed this before, but Pete Sampras and Novak had a little bit of a powwow at Indian Wells. I think it was in 2019. It might have been in 2020, but I think it was 19. And Pete's advice to Novak was stay out of politics. It's taking away your focus and what you need to do. And that's how Pete went about things. Never said anything controversial, and just, didn't say really anything about anything was kind of Pete's strategy. Novak hasn't really subscribed to that, and I think he respected the advice, but obviously didn't really heed to it. But it's interesting because the one thing that would concern me more than anything is not the crowd, not the hostile crowd, but the mental energy. How much of it has he burned this week? How much exhaustion could set in from all of the, I guess, the trauma of the last week? That's where I feel like that happened at the US Open. I think he was fried mentally by the time he hit the final from having all of these intense, high pressure, high nervy matches that he had all throughout the US Open. And I think that's the concern, that it's just going to be mentally exhausting.
Yeah, those are really good points. I agree with you across the board. And then the other little factor, and I'm a female, so I tend to, we tend to look at relationships a little bit differently than you guys do. But to me, having the other players come down on you in that way, and there was a new video that I saw when I woke up this morning from Tsitsipas that was very critical of Novak. I mean, searingly critical of him. When you know that your compadres on the tour, your fellow players, are angry with you, and for something completely unrelated to tennis, how does that affect you? For me, that would really bother me. I would find it almost impossible to compete. But I know, different people have different mentalities, and he's a champion. So maybe he can block that out. What do you think?
I agree with you. When people are mad at me, when it's happened in my life, and it's been on a scale of obviously a personal bubble, not a global bubble, but it doesn't feel, it feels bad, and it makes it difficult to function. So there's no doubt about that. I think that's a good point about the peer, the idea of peers having emotions, strong emotions, either negatively or positive towards him at this time. I think that's a good point. Well, we can't wait for the tournament. As always, we will have coverage on 3. Haven't put together a real plan yet. I'll be upfront about that, but we will be present. We will be obviously doing shows, and it'll be an exciting time as another Grand Slam in the era of the Big 3 is upon us. Might get some Novak news soon as well. Who knows? Or maybe even after this posts. I don't know. Let's see. But that'll do it for this episode of 3. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms. Leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.